the meeting started.
So you want me to pick that up? Where's your case and stuff? It's all down there. I will. Okay, I can figure all that out. Where's the word
Good evening. My name is Fred Durham. I'm the acting director for the West Virginia Division of Air Quality. The purpose of this public meeting is to provide information to you and to accept your comments on two proposed air quality permits. One is for the Mountain Compressor Station located in Tyler County, and the other is for the Canton North Compressor Station located here in Doddridge County. Basically, we have the use of this facility till about 8 o'clock this evening. We're going to go through a brief presentation just to describe the facility, tell you what kind of air emissions are going to be coming from that facility, what kind of controls, and what regulations apply to that facility. I brought with me a team from our Air Quality Division. I've got Jerry Williams. He's a registered professional engineer. He's the person that's been the point man on developing both of these permits. Sitting next to him to his right is Jay Fedzak. He's the assistant director for permitting for the Division of Air Quality. And to his right is Beth McCune. She's our supervisor for new source construction permits. And here at my right is Stephanie Hammonds, who does a lot of our public outreach efforts, and she's going to facilitate the meeting, make sure that everyone has a chance to be heard here at the meeting. After the presentation by Jerry, we will accept formal comments to go on the record from anyone that wants to speak. We have quite a number of people here, so I would ask you to be succinct in your comments, but we will try to accommodate whatever you want to say. And if you have written comments, you can also submit them at this time as well. After the formal comment period, we'll open up, assuming we have time, I think we will, we'll open up the meeting for a question and answer period so that you can ask questions that we will answer, but those won't be reflected in the formal permitting record keeping. So does anybody have any questions of me at this point?
Are you recording this?
We are recording this.
Thank you for saying that.
I already started.
Okay. I was like, oh no, I didn't push the button.
But thank you for reminding us. But we've got that covered, and so I think we'll just again launch into Jerry's presentation. Jerry, if you could
Still checking if you want to make sure.
It's on that. Let me send that.
Thank you, Fred, and I'd like to thank the Senior Center for allowing us to have a meeting here, and thanks for everyone for coming out tonight. Like Fred said, I was the reviewing engineer of these permit applications, and what I'm going to do is go through a presentation where we go through a brief overview of what Antero has applied for permit for, what type of units that they will have at the site, controls, the rules that would apply, and then we can go from there. Some of the information I'm going to present, some of you people may already know, and others don't. So bear with me if you're already familiar with this. For a facility to require an air permit, several things have to happen. The facility would have to be subject to a substantive air requirement, which this facility is. They also would have to have criteria air pollutants that exceed a certain threshold, which they do, and they would have, or hazardous air pollutants would exceed a certain threshold, what they do. So Antero sees these items on both compressor stations, so they were required to apply for an air quality permit. So once an air quality permit is required, they go through an application process. where the applicant submits the necessary forms to us. We review the forms for completeness and notify the applicant of anything that may be deficient. And then I review the application, do a technical review, determine which rules apply to the facility, and whether or not what the company has applied for meet those rules. At that time, we develop a engineering evaluation or a fact sheet and a draft permit. So if we make a determination that all the air quality rules that apply to the source are met, we publish a notice of intent in the newspaper to notify the public that we intend to issue this permit and provide for a 30-day comment period, which is where we're at right now. We make the evaluation and the draft permit available for review by the public. And then, any comments that we receive, we address those comments. And if public meetings requested, we have a public meeting, which is what we're doing. Once we receive comments, questions, we go through those, review those, and then after that, we make a final decision on the permitting action. So that's an overview of what the application process is like. What does Antero apply for? They want to install a natural gas compressor station at the Canton North site in Doddard County. And we also decided, since they applied for a permit for the Mountain Compressor Station in Tyler County, even though we did not get a formal request for a public meeting for the Mountain site, we did get a comment on the Mountain site, but we only received a formal request for a public meeting on Canton. We decided to have a public meeting for both, just so everything was out there. So, a compressor station, you have natural gas, from wells that will enter the system, and goes through a pipeline under pressure to a compressor stations. You have to have those along a pipeline to continue to move the gas. As topography changes, friction in the line changes, pressure of the gas drops, and then it would just sit there if it had no way to move on that line. So you have to have compressor stations strategically along the pipeline in order for the gas to continue to move. So essentially, the compressor station, which has engines that help propel the gas, is the energy that powers the natural gas pipeline. You have the engines there that move the gas. Well, I've already went through this slide. Basically, they're along the pipeline in order to move the gas along. So, you're going to have those at various places depending upon the topography and depending upon how much friction is generated in the line. So in addition to the natural gas compressor engines that you have at a compressor station, we're going to talk about these specifically. You also have glycol dehydration units, which remove the water from the gas. And not just produce water, but also any type of pipeline fluids that may exist in the gas. They have, and associated with that dehydration unit, they also have reboilers, which helps generate the glycol to remove the water from the gas. And then they have storage tanks for the pipeline fluids and the produced water. They also have 2 microturbine generators to provide electricity for the facility. And they will have pipeline loadout racks. So when the tanks fill with fluid, they'll have a way of having a loadout system that a truck can come in. They can pump the fluids in the truck, and then they can take the fluid away. So as the gas enters the station, there are liquids in the gas, so it'll pass through a separator, which will remove some of those liquids before it goes to the engines to get pushed on down the line. And those liquids are sent to the storage tanks that I talked about. And then, so once those initial liquids fall out of the separator and go to the tanks, and then goes through the compressor engines, then there's still liquids in the tanks, so it'll go through a dehydration process where it'll remove any further liquids in order for the gas to be pipeline quality to go on down the line. So now that I've talked briefly about some of the emission units at the site, I'm going to talk about the types of pollutants that are present at the site and what type of, from the different types of sources and what types of pollutants exist. So, you have combustion sources, anything that's going to combust natural gas, like the pressure engines, and the small reboilers that are with the dehydration units, and they have one small catalytic heater. And so you're going to have like sources of emissions from combustion. You have combustion emissions from think about it, like the emissions you're going to have like when you drive your car, or on a much larger scale. I'm just talking about like you combust gas, so you have emissions from it. And those pollutants are like nitrogen oxides, which you'll sometimes hear as NOx, carbon monoxide, volatile organic compounds or VOCs, sulfur dioxide, particulate matter, and hazardous air pollutants or HAPs. And like I said, you're going to find those on the engines, the microturbines, and the reboilers. And I included a photograph of what a typical natural gas compressor engine looks like. And in this particular situation here, the compressor station, they house the engines in a building, which according to Ontario, when I talked to them about that, they said the engines that they proposed to install at these facilities would be housed in a building. I know that I did get that question from someone on the telephone, but I just wanted to answer that question. So another source of pollution are natural gas dehydration units. And from those, you're going to have your VOCs, your volatile organic compounds, and your hazardous air pollutants. Essentially what happens is, in a dehy, you have the gas that is rich with like water, produced water, natural gas pipeline liquid. It's going to pass through a vessel where you have like glycol in it, and the glycol will absorb the water that is in the gas. And so it basically then sends the dry gas down the pipeline, and then the wet gas, or the water, that part is then sent to the reboiler to be burned as fuel to further reduce emissions from that. And then you have the exhaust from the reboiler that vents to the atmosphere. And there's a photograph of a typical glycol dehydration unit. Also, you have natural gas storage tanks, or not natural gas, but pipeline liquid storage tanks or condensate, you may hear it referred as, and produce water. And from that, and you also have like the loadout racks. From that, you'll have the VOCs and HAPs. And so basically, whenever something will go from a high pressure to a low pressure, you'll have what they call flashing emissions, where you'll have VOCs and HAPs that'll flash off. And that'll happen when the liquids go from the initial separator to the settling tank, and there you'll have flash vapors from that. Now the settling tank, or all of the settling tank, the two condensate tanks, the two produced water tanks, and a loadout rack, all will be controlled with what's called a vapor recovery unit, which will reduce the emissions from the VOCs and HAPs by 98%. And here's a photograph of a typical produced water and condensate tank. Obviously it's Chesapeake, not Ontario, but that's the photograph that I had, and they're all fairly similar, just some different colors. They're usually like in this case, it's a 400 barrel tank, which is 1,680 gallons, if I did the math right in my head.
16,000.
Yeah, no, not 16,000.
How many tanks will be on site?
Give me one second. One, I gotta. Yeah, you're right, 16,800 gallons. I just moved to zero in the right place. There will be, as far as the tank, what will happen is, like I said, when the water comes in from an initial separator, it'll go to a settling tank. And from the settling tank, it'll either go to one of two produced water tanks or one of two condensate tanks. So there'll be 5 of the 400 barrel or 16,800 gallon tanks. And there'll also be 5 smaller storage tanks that'll store like used oil or lube oil for the engines, or yeah, basically. And the sizes of those tanks are, 2 of them are 1,000 gallons and 3 of them are 2,000 gallons. So natural gas liquids load out, you have the produced water and condensate that we talked about earlier, and that will be loaded off-site by truck, and the emissions from both of those load outs will be controlled by a vapor recovery unit, which controls emissions of VOC and HAP by 98%. That's a rudimentary photograph of a loadout rack. I'm sure the one that will be at this compressor station this is kind of like a smaller loadout thing, like what you might find at a well site. The one at a compressor station will be much more advanced than this. So now I'll talk about a little bit about the control devices that Antero has proposed on the different emission units that they have. Compressor engines will have catalytic reduction, where it'll reduce NOx emissions by 99%, carbon monoxide by 98%, volatile organic compounds 50%, formaldehyde 76%. And then the storage tank we talked about earlier will reduce VOCs and HAPs by 98%. The DEP units will be controlled by a flare, and it's an enclosed flare, so it's not like an open flame flare. You won't see a flame from it, it's enclosed. The VOCs and HAPs are controlled by 98%. And then small separators, or flash tanks, that are part of the DEP unit, basically is where the gas that has been absorbed by, the liquid absorbs some of the gas, and that'll flash off when we have a pressure drop. The VOCs and HAPs there will be controlled by 95%. So rules that might apply to a facility like this are there's West Virginia State Air Quality rules, national emissions, or EPA rules, NESHAPs that deal with hazardous air pollutants, where you have to apply certain technologies to those, and nuisance performance standards, which are also rules from federal standards from EPA. The next 3 slides, I should say, are rules that might apply from compressors, might apply to natural gas facilities. I'm not going to go through them one by one, but I'm just going to show you the rules that might apply, and then I'll talk about the rules that apply to stationary. But you've got rules safe to have your permit, rules on particulate matter, rules on volatile organic compounds, rules on NOx, rules on sulfur dioxide, rules on volatile organic compounds, sulfur dioxide, VOC, NOx, COPM, So all these different rules might apply to this facility. So now I'm going to go through the ones that do apply. So you've got, Rule 2, which is a particulate matter rule, and it deals with like opacity. So basically, visible emissions, like visible opacity emissions, and they can't exceed like 10%. And the way to look at that would be like if you saw smoke coming out of your tailpipe. Like if you look at your tailpipe and you can see right through it and nothing's in your way, then like a 0% opacity. Like you can see everything. Now if it was like completely black and you couldn't see anything at all, that's 100%. Like if you can't see through it at all. I mean, it's much more complex than that, but I'm just trying to like explain what that opacity means. So basically 10% is on the lower end of the scale. Like, so if they had 10% come from a fuel burning unit, then they would be in exceedance. And then you have Rule 6, which is a rule that deals with the flare that they're going to have. And it also has a passing limitation on a flare that it can't exceed 20%. Rule 13 is a rule that requires Antero to apply for the permit, which is what I talked about earlier. Are they subject to a rule? Are they above an emission threshold? Talk about that later if I have to. And then to go get some of the federal standards, you have these standards here apply to engines. So the compressor engines that Antero has applied for permit for, those engines have to be tested once within the first year, and then every 8,760 hours for 3 years thereafter. So basically, the engines have to be tested annually. Yes, sir.
Diesel or natural gas?
Natural gas. So they have to be tested annually to show compliance with the rule. And what this rule does is set forth emission limits on NOx, CO, and VOC. There's also another rule, subpart quad O or 40000, and it also deals with reciprocating compressors and compressor engines and what requirements they have on those as far as like replacing the raw packing in order to make sure that they're operating efficiently. Storage tanks, that rule requires them to reduce their emissions of storage tanks by 95%. What they propose is 98%, but the rule requires them to reduce it by 95%. Also, the glycol dehydration units have standards that they have to meet. They have to be below a certain level of a specific height, which the level for that is 1 ton per year, and their proposal is, give me 1 second. It's about half of a ton a year. And there are also more rules on the engines, which basically this is a NESHAP, which is a hazardous air pollutant rule that deals with the engines. And those rules are also being met by the proposal. Testing is required of the facility would be to test the engines like I talked about. And they also have to do a maintenance plan and keep maintenance records on those engines. They have to monitor the quantity of natural gas that's consumed in combustion sources. They have vent requirements on all the vapor recovery units. There's requirements on the flare. They have to ensure that all the vapors are sent to the flare from the vapor recovery unit and the storage tanks.
John, who does this monitoring and inspecting? Is that Antero that does that, or is that you guys?
Both.
Okay.
Those facilities are inspected on a regular basis. As far as like, okay, like when we talk about the testing or inspecting, the questions about the inspecting, what will happen is they have to keep certain records that would be prescribed in the permit. And there's how they have to do it. They have to do it daily, monthly, and it's all prescribed in the permit. So those records, they do have to use those records, and then an inspector will go to that facility and ensure that those records are being kept.
So the inspector's inspecting the record keeping that Antero's keeping, rather than the actual thing that's going on.
What things going? What are you talking about?
Well, monitor the quantity of natural gas consumed in all combustion reasons. So take the first one, for instance. So
those are all metered.
Okay.
So,
Where they being sent to?
it'd be difficult to and most of these units are. You got manufacturer date on a unit, and you say, okay, it's like 1,000 horsepower, and the emissions are set at 1,000 horsepower, or kind of look at like parametric monitoring. Kind of look at it like this. Like say, if it's a 1,000 horsepower engine, and the emissions are based on operating that 1,000 horsepower engine 100% of the time. There's only so much gas that you can feed through that engine. So, depending upon what the limit is, they would not be able to exceed that value. You can't run the engine more than what the nameplate of the engine is. So, as far as manipulating the records, I'm not going to say people don't manipulate stuff. That's what you say. I can't say that. But, in a situation like that, I would find it difficult to do. So, and then there's certain records also that are required to be kept, which we talked about, the natural gas consumption, flow rate for the high units, and that information there is ran through a model, so that's also difficult to, mislead because, it's a computer model and, it was, if something was squirrely on the input, the output would definitely just be a mess and it wouldn't come out. All testing is required. All testing is required. There's a certain protocol that has to be met. It's the EPA protocol, so whenever they go to test the engine, they have to submit that protocol to the agency in advance. I believe it's like 30 days. So that way the testing protocol can be approved and that we can send an inspector out there to witness the test. The test, like I said, it's a standardized test. I mean, it's not something, once again, that I see that can be manipulated based upon the standards that are set.
And I would interject here that there's really serious penalties if a company is found to be falsifying records. And these requirements are enforceable both by the state and EPA once the permit's issued.
When you say serious records, I mean, if they're making $1 million a week out of the gas, what's...
Well, some of the fines are like $25,000 a day per infraction per day.
And you
And is it Fitner also?
had to need to institute those fines against? any of these industries?
We definitely penalize companies for not necessarily for falsifying records for other infractions, yes.
Yes.
When I talked to you on the phone and I asked you if you did air quality monitoring to make sure that the emissions they're saying they're going to emit, and you said no. So how do you know if they're falsifying or not if you don't do an air quality monitor before that station starts and then once it's up and running? How do you know they're following what they're saying?
Can we just let him get through the presentation and then we will give you an opportunity to ask questions and we'll answer,
If there's time.
No,
We
we will answer your questions and give you time to comment.
Okay, so, anyway, that was kind of funny. I didn't know that was the last slide. But like I said, I know that Stephanie, I'm going to hand over to Stephanie now and take comments and questions, and we'll get, hopefully have answers to the questions that you're looking for. And I'll go. Thanks for your attention. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jerry. Okay, so now we're going to take comments from anybody that has comments. You'll read it into the record. If you have written comments you want to submit to us, you can give them to us now. You can give them to us at the end of the meeting. But the comment period will end at the end of the meeting tonight. We ask that you remember two things. We can only address issues which pertain to air quality. I mean, that's why we're here, and that's what we can address. And we just ask that people be courteous to each other. Everyone will have opportunity to comment and to ask a question. So I'm going to start with the sign-in sheet for those who marked yes that they wanted to comment. Ms. Barron?
Right here. I
Okay.
was going to turn the light
I was
on.
going to say, I was wondering if that was over here.
Is that
If you-
any better?
Yeah, it's fine.
Well, there's probably
There's probably another switch.
Yeah, there's a switch that turns these guys on. I don't know how much time you're going to allot for people asking questions, but I have 16 of them, and I do have a printed out copy that I will hand you.
Okay.
My biggest concern is Howard County has been inundated with compressor stations that are around every corner, as well as well pads. The first question I want to ask is, how many compressor stations are actually in Doddridge County? Because the cumulative effects of all of those compressor stations definitely have an adverse effect on the air quality and the health and well-being, as well as our water in this region. Okay. The other question that I wanted to ask is, I have serious concerns because of the condensate tanks and the storage routine that is being located where it is. It's real close to the McElroy Creek. So not only do you have the possibility of those tanks, even though they might be new, leaking and ending up in the water supply, which will affect people's water wells, etc. So I have concerns. Antero's track record in our region has been less than stellar as far as accidents on their well pads. I know all you guys deal is with air quality, but every time they have a spill, some of that stuff escapes into the atmosphere, and residents in the area have to deal with it. Okay? Now, I'll read the questions that I have, and, okay. Since the operations of the pig launchers and receivers, which I'm assuming are going to be located at this compressor site because of all the pipelines that are going into it, are frequently the source of large quantities of raw gas being released into the atmosphere. And since they are frequently located on compressor site, has there been any consideration or quantification of how much gas will be released from them and how often? Will the raw gas just released elsewhere from the compressor station location outside of the fence line, will that be included in the permit, or are you just looking at the emissions within the fence line? What methods will be used to capture all natural gas released during blowdowns or maintenance on the pipelines coming into and out of the compressor site? The other question I want to know is how much volume will this compressor station be handling? We have been seeing our landscape being completely and totally denuded and scarred by pipelines that are getting put in. The pipelines they're putting in that are going through this area, they're not what we're used to on the conventional method. We're talking 16 to 24-inch pipelines. Okay, so that's an incredible volume. So how much gas is going to be processed? That in itself will definitely affect the emissions that are involved. Is the vapor recovery unit listed for the loadout, for the tanks, only for the NGL tanks, or will it also cover the tanks with the produced water? On page 2 of both the engineering and evaluations sheet, it has fugitive emissions from component leaks and emissions from venting or blowdown events will also occur. This seems to imply that this will be negligible and insignificant. It has been our experience in surrounding counties, Wetzel, Marshall, Tyler, and Doddridge, that the quantity of the intentionally and sometimes accidentally released condensate fumes and raw gas fumes is very, very significant. What measurements or monitoring will Antero be required to perform to either qualify these types of gas releases or, in the alternative, to guarantee in writing that they will never occur? From the Canton North location, it says, a site inspection was conducted on February 5th, 2014 by Doug Hamill of DAQ Enforcement. According to Mr. Hamill, the site location is appropriate for the proposed facility. There appears to be 4 nearby residential buildings close to this compressor station. One home seems to be about 350 feet to 400 feet. Another one approximately 1,000 feet. Yet another is 1,100 feet, and still another is 1,400 feet. Given the very large quantity of the noise and all the types of air pollutants, and especially the HAPs, this seems to be very close to these homes. Is Antero able to guarantee that no harmful air pollutants will ever leave their property and migrate onto or above these other properties? The ability to smell or not to smell objectionable odors does not mean that there won't be harmful vapors present. Will the air quality be regularly monitored at these homes? And if not, why not? What schedule will be put in place to monitor the air quality? I don't want to hear a year. This should be done on a very, very regular basis. There are a lot of people that live in this area that have young children, senior folks with compromised health situations, and to be exposed to this will only exacerbate their situations. Will specific detailed air quality testing be done now in the immediate areas surrounding these two compressor stations? And this includes the Mountain compressor station, to provide a baseline historical data for future reference. Are you setting up or checking before the compressor is put in and active to see what the quality of the air is in the area? Or is it just going to be based on after the fact? If you don't have a baseline, you really, in my eyes, you really cannot tell how the air quality has been affected. And right now, the amount of destruction as far as the trees and the vegetation that Antero has removed at that location takes away things that would help to purify the air. That's just my own personal opinion. And I do, by the way, have a degree in environmental sciences. I retired after working 30 years for a natural gas company. So I've been around this for a while. I know what can happen. I know things can be done right, but I also know things can go wrong. So that's just to give some background information on me. Next question. Is the DEP concerned about the overall regional effect of the impact of the air quality issues that these two gas-fired compressor locations are going to have, and how they might affect the long-term quality of the multi-county region? I know that you guys are just concerned with the immediate site. If you don't have stuff that's touching, you don't look at it. Right now, this county, with the well pads, the compressor stations, stuff needs to be aggregated. Laws need to be changed for that to happen. Significant noise levels will be caused by both of these compressor stations. Each one will have 18,480 horsepower of compressors. Will all measurements be taken to guarantee that the overall noise level will never be objectionable? I think it's good that they're housing the units, which will cut down some of the noise, but the amount that they're operating is pretty phenomenal. I've been past compressor sites that are close to being this large, and there never is a quiet moment while they're operating. The Department of Air Quality says that the Canton North compressor station is located in Doddridge County, which is an attainment county for all criteria pollutants. Therefore, the Canton North compressor station is not applicable to 45 CR 19. How does DAQ know that this is true? When was that determination made? How was the evaluation arrived at? Where was the measurement done? How often will that measurement and monitoring be repeated to assure that all residents, that their air quality stays the same? What have the trends been over the last 5 years in other regions that have been confronted with this? Has there been any effort on the part of the DAQ to attempt to assess the long-term cumulative effects of these two compressor stations and their associated gas wells and all of the fugitive emissions, intentional blow-offs that are associated with the interconnecting gathering pipelines between and among all of the non-contiguous and non-adjacent well pads? Will Antero be able to assure all of the residents that their personal NOx emissions will never mix with any of their well pad VOCs? Will they guarantee that there will be no additional ozone created in these counties? Will the West Virginia DEQ and Antero be able to categorically and unequivocally assure that all the residents of all of the contiguous and adjacent counties that there will be no measurable or noticeable or discernible or harmful deterioration to their current air quality? Page 9, the engineering and evaluation says the proposed 1,680 horsepower Wakaso 7044 GSA Rice are not certified by the manufacturer to meet the emission standards listed in 40 CFR 60, subpart JJK. Since all of the engines will not be certified by the manufacturer, the projected emissions which form the basis for the permit calculations are likely, at best, theoretical values, achievable under new controlled factory perfect conditions. Given that many of the variables which affect their combustion efficiency, and since shale gas has varying BTU content and chemical composition, I only have a couple more. Okay, and I'm speaking not just for myself, I'm speaking on behalf of a bunch of people.
You are going to submit these as well.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
I'm just
Just wanted
having
to make
people in the
sure.
room that want to sign. I am submitting you written comments,
Okay.
okay? So you don't have to write it all down. But anyway, most of the testing on the engines is typically done under ideal situations. My experience with oil and gas, because of the varying factors of the composition of the gas, how the engines run, is different. We don't live in a perfect world. So, but the permit applications are based on the, quote, perfect world. So I have questions on the validity. So will the engines, sensors, and controls be required? Will they be tested after they're in production for a period of time and then followed up on that to make sure that the emission standards are being met? DAQ documents state, however, because the facility is an area source of HAP emissions and the actual average benzene emissions from the glycoldehyde unit is below 0.9 megagrams per year, or 1 ton per year, it is exempt for all requirements of subpart HH. Does Antero and the West Virginia DAQ therefore consider that the actual BTEXs and HAPs released to the atmosphere will therefore be less harmful to those in the nearby area? Will these HAPs therefore be confined to the Antero property? Can't see how that can happen unless they plan on putting a bubble over it. You know, air moves. This thing is in a situation where it's in a straight shot, it's in a valley that goes through, it's going to travel into surrounding areas depending on how the wind blows. Okay, will each compressor station be manned 24/7 with a trained operator capable of responding to any upset, accurately assessing the potential danger or problem, and be able to implement prompt corrective actions? The last time I sat through one of these meetings, it was an unmanned station. The amount of gas going through it was freaking phenomenal. It was also Antero, and they were basing the safety aspect on computer monitoring. The site was being monitored off-site, where they theoretically had the controls to shut stuff down, they could watch it. Well, computers, we've all had issues with viruses, etc. But they were not manned sites. So, and somehow or other, you know, human being might fall asleep 24/7 if they're there, but someone needs to be there to react. And actually, that explosion on Route 77 last year, no one apparently caught it to be able to shut things down. So, okay, fugitive emissions are mentioned in both permit documents. The emissions can come from any of the many valves, pipings, fittings, unions, flanges, compressor seals, and rod packings, etc. They can be caused by routine wear, rust, corrosion, improper installation, or faulty components, or lack maintenance procedures, and the general deterioration that comes with age and operation. What is the estimate of all fugitive emissions for each of these compressor locations? How will they be measured, and what method will be used to identify and correct the source? And the other stuff I want to know is what the volume going through the site is going to be. Other questions that I have, the condensate tanks, we're looking at 5 tanks, each one containing 16,800 gallons per tank. The issue that occurred down in Charleston in January, this is, once again, close to a creek, okay? I am a member of the Doddridge County Watershed Association. My biggest concern with all this is to try to protect our water and our air. The other situation that we've had in this county alone has been the really non-stellar safety track record as far as this particular company is concerned. We are continually confronted with wrecks on our roads, gas well explosions related to condensate tanks because of the pressure, and they don't have proper venting, or they don't have a closed system on the venting situation. So, oh yeah, I'm done. I will give you this. And thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Jody Moore, I want to say it correctly, I'm sorry, that's incorrect.
I just have a question about procedure too, like when would we hear answers to these questions?
Well, what we would really like people to do right now is just comment. If you have a comment that you want to read or to turn in to us, and then we'll open it up for questions. The things that we can answer tonight, obviously we want to answer tonight, but there may be questions that you ask that we may have to take back with us. And there will be a response to comments document that will be formally drawn up by Jerry. So all of your questions will be included in that if they're not answered here tonight.
Will those answers be included on your website so it's readily available for people?
Those answers will be mailed to you personally if you're here tonight. And you provided us with a legible and correct address. So if you can sort of hold your questions till after the commenters get done, then that way, Jerry might be able to answer something directly.
Hi, good evening. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate that. I am not going to be able to just comment and not ask questions. I'm going to have questions, and then based on your answers, I may change my comments, or vice versa. First of all, I think this is a question you can ask or answer this evening. Is this Antero or is this Williams? Because I'm confused.
Antero.
Who's operating the compressor station?
Antero.
Antero?
Yes.
Where does Williams come into this?
That's Mr. Williams.
That's Mr. Jerry Williams right there.
My name's Jerry Williams.
Okay, Williams is not, no, there's a company
There
called
is
Williams.
a Williams Ohio
Okay.
Valley Midstream, yes, but
Okay,
Williams Ohio Valley Midstream
Absolutely
was not
nothing.
in the application at all. It was
okay,
Antero.
okay. They just offer or operate a lot of compressor stations.
They do natural gas processing, and they do have some compressor stations, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And Antero is primarily known as a drilling company.
They have gas drilling, gas well sites where they do drilling, and they also have compressor stations, yes.
Okay. Just doing a little bit of research. This is commenting. In the past, since 2011, December 3rd, 2011, Marengo County in Alabama compressor fire explosion. March 29, 2012, Lothrop, Springville, PA, Susquehanna County, compression station fire and explosion. July 23, 2012, the Windsor compressor station, lightning strike. Oh dear. Caused a blowdown, exhaust to catch fire. May 14, 2013, Williams Central Station, Brooklyn, PA, Susquehanna County again, in PA, explosion and a fire. May 30th, 2013, 16 days later, Branchburg, New Jersey, compressor station fire, explosion, 13 injured. June 24th, 2013, Gossamer, Louisiana, O'Flynn's plant, explosion, fire. January 6, 2014, Windsor, New York, compressor station fire. This is not factory tested equipment that operates in a perfect world, as Mariana said. I don't think the quality controls are there. Permitting and paper applications, how do these things occur? How do these things occur? Equipment failures, pipes rust, new pipes, we're using old pipes on new compressor stations. How does this happen? How do we guarantee this doesn't happen here? How do we make best practices? We're not there. How do we continue to permit these exploding hazards? How do we do that? How do we keep saying yes? How do we keep justifying never meeting a permit we haven't fallen in love with? How do we do this to human beings? These are not residential structures. These are homes. These are not abandoned properties. Statistically, demographically, these are our elders. These are our children. This is our future. We've got to pay attention to this. According to the West Virginia DEP Air Quality website, there appear to be, correct me if I'm wrong, this is a question and a comment, 9 stationary monitoring sites in the state of West Virginia. Is that correct? Charleston, Greenbrier County, Huntington, Martinsburg, Morgantown, Moundsville, Parkersburg, Weirton, and Wheeling. Is that right? That's where our air quality data for the state of West Virginia comes from. These 9 locations, correct? And it's updated daily. You can go to the website and look at the air quality in these areas. There's some moderate air quality on May the 8th as of 7 a.m. in Moundsville. Anything happening in Moundsville? Some moderate air quality in Weirton as of May the 8th. Anything going on in the Weirton area? Okay. Is that correct? These are the 9 West Virginia stationary air quality monitoring locations.
Well, we have different monitors for different pollution. There's different pollutants that we monitor for. We have ozone monitors, and that sounds like about right for the ozone monitors.
For ozone.
We also monitor for particulate matter.
Okay.
We also monitor for sulfur dioxide.
Okay.
We also monitor for carbon monoxide. So there's additional monitoring sites to the ones that you mentioned, but we tend to locate the monitors where the highest population areas are.
Not those problems exist before the highest.
Which then answers my other question, what do we got in Diamonds County?
Well, we've got 55 counties in West Virginia, and we have limited resources, so we try to protect the highest exposure populations.
Yeah. And again, these compressor stations are permitted individually and are not aggregated. They are not aggregated. Also, I just want to make sure that I read correctly the information available on the West Virginia DEP, Division of Air Quality Compliance and Enforcement website, information for the public. I'll make sure you're aware of what the information for the public is, and make sure I didn't misread it, and I wrote it down. The section also handles citizens' complaints involving dust, fallout, odor problems, open burning, and in many instances, the ability to satisfactorily handle a citizen's concern regarding an air pollution issue is based upon immediate notification to the DEQ that a problem is being experienced and the ability to rapidly respond to the complaint. Okay, so call when there are odors, when there are problems, where to call. We're clear on that?
May I?
It goes on to say, this is my time. Okay, I mean, I appreciate that, but I'm going on to read what the website says. That's cool. That's cool. But you're in our house now.
He asked us to respond to.
Right, I'm not done, and then you can respond.
All right, I apologize.
That's cool. It's all right, we're all friends here. Okay. Quite often, notification is too late to allow an inspector to observe and document the alleged violation, or our inspectors are not immediately available due to the fact that they have already may be involved in another compliance and/or enforcement-related issue. Okay, so let's make sure we're all clear. Call, but
Don't hold your breath.
no, hold your breath. No, hold your breath. Okay. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I didn't mean to interrupt you. But on the handout that we provided at the back room, on the back page of that handout is telephone contact information. So if
So you can call.
just provide the phone number, so if there is an issue, you
Well,
can call
another thing you
it.
can do too is if you want to take a picture or you want to make a
Of AO?
video of the problem that you're having. You know, especially if it's something you can photograph.
Right.
Or make a video of it. And you can email those to us as well.
And the nosebleeds and
Take a picture of it.
take a picture of it. And I guess another question of mine, I think that may have been covered in some of 16, was the fugitive emissions. The fact sheets do say they're going to happen. These blowdowns are going to happen. These things are going to occur. And are they? How does one calculate that into the total amount that's in the permit? How does one calculate mechanical failures that seem to be really plaguing a compressor station in Washington, PA? And continually, you see reports of flaring and black smoke and noxious fumes constantly. They're having these problems in Washington County. So is that part of the permitting process? Let's see, portable air quality monitors. Does the DAQ possess these? Do you have them?
We've got some testing equipment, but I wouldn't call it a portable air quality monitor. If you're talking like an ozone monitor, it's a box about this big, about this tall, about this deep. That's a stationary. There are devices on the market that certain organizations have tested, and some of them have pretty good results, and some of them have pretty bad results.
What does the DAQ have? I mean, can you test for VOx? Can you test for the emissions that are being permitted? Do you have the equipment to verify and test?
Well, there's not a concentration limit that's specified in the permit, so what will we be testing for?
When there's a blowdown or a problem, or when you're called, as we're told to call, when there's a problem. If you can't smell it, how do you write a violation if you don't know what the citizens are being exposed to? That's
Something had to catch your attention to call us to begin with, which I would presume would probably be an odor, or you saw a flame, or something.
But so it will never be known what the citizens were exposed to, whether it be BTEX chemicals, or VOx, or PAPS, or...
Well, there's not a universal portable monitor to do what you're saying to do.
So the DEP doesn't have a way to test for these things?
Well, there's not a monitor, like, there's not, like, you don't have a monitor where you can just say, I want to know what the benzene concentration is, or I want to know what the toluene concentration is, or I want to know what the VOC concentration is. Like, you can't just pick a pollutant on a monitor and get an instantaneous result.
Okay, but we can permit for them.
That's completely different. That's not, it's not.
We can't
You
verify.
can't get an instantaneous reading on a portable monitor. A portable monitor, if it was for a specific pollutant, and you had a portable monitor for a specific pollutant, and if those exist, like, you know, there are certain monitors for a specific pollutant, you take it out, and it could detect that there may be a problem, but it's not going to tell you that there's definitely a problem. It may say, you know, those type of monitors, those instantaneous monitors, it's not going to tell you that there's actually a problem. It could tell you that there may be a problem and further testing needs to be done, but it's not like an instantaneous thing that you can just say, well, this is what my problem is.
And one thing I can tell you is that even in other parts of the, you were pointing toward the northern panhandle, and where, even in areas like that, which have had even more oil and gas activity than Doddridge County, ozone levels are down, PM 2.5 levels, particulate matter's down compared to past years. So even with the increased activity, we're seeing downward trends in the pollutants.
And what does the moderate air quality index mean? That's particulate matter, what, it's not necessarily ozone.
Well, it would probably be driven by either ozone or particulate matter. Right now, West Virginia is in attainment for throughout the state for the most stringent standard for ozone and for PM2.5, the fine particulate standard. The most stringent standards that EPA said. States all around us are out of compliance, and we're not.
Would that be why you were quoted as saying the West Virginia DEP is concerned that the EPA is moving forward? Despite its own projections on carbon dioxide emissions?
That's a different pollutant that you're talking about there. Carbon dioxide was that specific comment was made with respect to power plants.
Coal-fired power plants, right.
With EPA setting
Right.
standards for resource performance standards for power plants.
Right. And in the 8 years, it's not going to be a significant reduction.
Well, the EPA in its own rule said that it would not, that it had no quantifiable benefits
Okay.
For greenhouse gases.
for greenhouse
Right,
gases.
but these compressor stations, both of them, the Mountain one and the Canton North, carbon dioxide equivalents of 99 some thousand, almost, what, tons per year? So there's some savings for you. I just found you some savings.
The typical power plant is more like millions of tons.
Okay, so we're not going to concern ourselves with compressor stations.
I don't think that's a fair comparison at all.
The average home that heats with natural gas would put out 1,000 tons or more of greenhouse gases. So it's
Carbon dioxide.
carbon dioxide equivalent. Yes, that is a very different pollutant than things like particulate or VOC
And
health
ROS
effects
and HAPs and the other things that we're not able to test for or verify. We just going to permit emissions for. That's all my comments and questions.
Okay, Christina Woods.
Hi, my name's Christina Woods. I just have a little comment before I start mine about the air quality reporting to you guys. I had issues for 3 years with dust on my road that I contacted y'all about. I lived in dust for 3 years because of oil and gas, and I had a DHU guy come out, looked, and sent me an email later, said, why don't you put a sprinkler on the road? That would probably help you. And a sign up back for him to slow down. He said it wasn't your guys' department to help us with the dust with oil and gas on an access road. So I've been quite disappointed in the DAQ. But one of the things I want to talk about is you talked about all the things that you're permitting, but you didn't talk about what those things are and what the health effects are. And I live 1.8 miles away from this going to be put in. I have a respiratory illness, and there are people on my road that have respiratory illnesses. There are people on our road that have heart disease. We have old people. We have children with asthma. We have all kinds of issues. So volatile organic compounds, 75.33 tons per year. Long-term exposure can cause damage to the liver, kidneys, and central nervous system. Short-term can cause eye and respiratory tract irritation, headaches, dizziness, visual disorders, fatigue, loss of coordination, allergic skin reactions, nausea, and memory impairment. That's just the VOCs. HAPs. They're suspected, which are the hazardous air pollutants. There's going to be 11.11 tons per year. That's suspected to cause cancer or other serious health effects such as reproductive effects or birth defects or adverse environmental effects. Carbon dioxide, we all know those are greenhouse gases. Particulate matter, less than 10 microns, 11.94 tons per year. I'm going to read this part. The size of particles is directly linked to their potential for causing health problems. Small particles less than 10 micrometers in diameter pose the greatest problems because they can get deep into your lungs, and some may even get into your bloodstream. Particle pollution, especially fine particles, contain microscopic solids or liquid droplets that are so small that they can get deep into the lungs and cause serious health problems. Numerous scientific studies have linked particle pollution exposure to a variety of problems, including premature death in people with heart or lung disease, non-fatal heart attacks, irregular heartbeat, aggravated asthma, decreased lung function, increased respiratory symptoms such as irritation of the airways, coughing, or difficulty breathing. People with heart or lung diseases, children, and other adults are most likely to be affected by particle pollution. So that's a big deal. I was exposed to that for 3 years, and I felt health effects. I had nosebleeds. I couldn't breathe some evenings, completely couldn't breathe. That's a big issue. So this particle, just that, I know how that is. So I can't imagine we're going to have more of that. That's great. Sulfur dioxide, 0.46 tons per year. That, again, you can have issues with adverse respiratory effects, including bronchoconstriction, increased asthma symptoms. Short-term exposure can cause increased visits to emergency departments and hospital admissions for respiratory illnesses, particularly in at-risk populations, including children, the elderly, and asthmatics. Again, oxides of nitrogen, 26.46 tons per year. It's linked with a number of adverse effects on the respiratory system. Also can cause or worsen respiratory illness disease such as emphysema and bronchitis, and can aggravate existing heart disease, leading to increased possible admissions and premature death. So every one of those, if you don't have a lung problem in Doddridge County, you're probably going to get one by the time we're all done with all these compressor stations and the tanks that are just blowing stuff at us constantly. It's a big issue, and I think things need to be put together. They need to be aggregated. Because these things don't happen in a vacuum. They're sitting by people's homes. It's a big issue. I grew up, my dad had polio. He had post-polio syndrome. He was on oxygen from 1990 until last year when he passed away. My mother died of lung cancer and COPD. I sat with her her last 26 hours when she could no longer breathe. Lung disease is a big deal. Do you know what happens? You slowly get to the point where you suffocate to death. Putting on your sock is a big deal. Eating is a big deal. You can't get out of your chair. Raising your hand up to your mouth is a problem. So whenever I see all this stuff is affecting our air and people that have lung problems, I have an issue with that. And They need to figure out how to get this under control, and they need to have more stringent regulations, and they can't sit there and say it's going to cost them too much money, because they're asking us to pay with respiratory disease, cancer, heart disease, birth defects. It's our children, our older people, and people that are sick. We're not expendable, we're not collateral damage, and we don't want to be a sacrifice county. Like you're saying, our county's too small to have an air quality monitor, because there's just, how many people, 1,800 people or whatever we have?
8,000.
8,000, I don't even know why I said that. We're not too small. We're not too small to have this industry completely inundate us. We need some health monitoring, we need help here. We don't need just permits being written. And that's where I am on this.
Wayne Woods?
That was my wife. My name is Wayne Woods. I live at 1585 Broad Run Road. That's just about 1.8 miles from the proposed Canton North location there, Antero's spot. And what I'm concerned with, well, I'm also a member of the Doddridge County Watershed Association. But anyway, one thing I'm concerned with, me being 1.8 miles away from this location, I have neighbors with young children that live right up the road from me, the Sandys. They have 2 small kids. I know one of them has asthma problems. And there's Connie Anderson that lives just even closer to the location than what I live. She has 2 kids. One of her son's an aspiring football player, and her daughter is just starting track. And if you know anything about Doddridge County is known for their track, their cross-country track team. And you know, is she going to go out here and practice for her track meets and be breathing, you know, the 99 tons of carbon dioxide a year, you know, the 75 tons of volatile organic chemicals. Those are things that I'm concerned about. And also, there are people that live closer to this site than what I live, and the folks that I'm talking about, where they live. You know, 300,000 feet away. And I know, you know, I don't know these folks personally, but they do have, I know they do have small children. And this is a particular concern. We all need to look into this and be concerned about these children, because this is going to be major health effects for them. What I ask is, at the least, is to extend this comment period another 30 days, and what I would really like is for you to deny this permit. With my relationship with the Watershed Association, I know that you all deal with air quality, but these particulates, McElroy Stream, world-renowned, at least it was a world-renowned musculine stream. People come from all over the country, and especially in Middle Island, and fish that, where it empties into Middle Island. That's one of the 2 catch and release streams in West Virginia for musclines. And no, it may not be draining directly into the stream, but when these air particulates are being spewed out, they are landing into the water, and that's a major concern for me. So thanks for having me here.
Linda Ireland?
I just have a couple of comments, and I guess my first question is rhetorical. Would you buy a house that's located 350 feet from this facility or 1,000 feet from this facility Really, who would? You know, if you saw this facility and you looked at what its emissions are and you heard it operating, nobody would buy that house. But we're already here, and we were here first. And we should have the right to say whether or not we want that where we live. The other thing I wanted to say is that with your purpose of preventing significant deterioration in our air quality, I hope that you will do that, but I don't see how it's possible to do that without considering the aggregate effects of this industry in the location. Because each of these facilities has regulations, and Terra manages to get it considered a not major source by saying they're not going to run they're going to reduce the operating time on their engines to keep it under the 100,000 threshold. But each of these facilities has an impact, and put all together, it's a lot more than any single facility. A recent Pennsylvania study found that nitrogen oxide emissions from all shale gas activities were 20 to 40 times higher than allowable for a single source, despite the fact that most of the facilities generally fall below the major source thresholds. And that same study found that compressor stations account for 60 to 70% of emission damages. The residents of this community must have the right to protect the necessary elements of life, and foremost are the air that we breathe. And such facilities should not be allowed if local residents object to them due to legitimate health and quality of life concerns.
Okay, Tammy, is it Beams?
Beamer.
Beamer?
Yes,
There was
I
a
have,
question mark in the-
I have questions, so I'll wait.
Okay, thank you very much. Tina Del Pree?
The table. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. Thank all of you for coming. After I talked to you, Mr. Williams, and you said we were going to have this meeting, I racked my brain trying to figure out what I was going to say, because there's so much to say, so much emotion in this county. So I couldn't come up with anything, so I decided to Google health effects from natural gas compression stations. I got 4,640,000 page result. Now, to say that was a bit overwhelming is an understatement. I'm obviously not a speaker. I'm not used to speaking in front of crowds, so I'm very nervous, as you can tell. So, I apologize. I know my voice will be cracking. I'll be stumbling. So of those 4,640,000 pages, I decided to just take the first page. It was a pretty short article, and it was from fracdallas.org. And it's compressor station hazards. It said the possibilities for health, safety, or environmental harm resulting from natural gas compressor stations are many and serious. Some of these include explosions and fires, leaks and spills, fugitive emissions of volatile organic compounds, and nitrogen oxide, as well as other potential exposure threats. While all of these types of hazards have been well documented nationwide, the most prevalent so far is the intentional or accidental release of volatile organic compounds and nitrogen oxide. But possible threats need to be considered when allowing compressor stations to operate, especially when in close proximity to homes, as well as environmentally sensitive locales, such as near water sources or agricultural production areas. Types of volatile organic compounds and nitrogen oxide that are commonly emitted in venting, uncontrolled or controlled releases of gases to prevent blowouts, flaring, burning of vented gases, or fugitive emissions, uncontrolled and largely unmonitored, including formaldehyde, benzene, toluene, ethylbenzene, xylene, hydrogen disulfide, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, methane, and other compounds or elements that are toxic, carcinogenic, or neurotoxic and which are prone to causing adverse health effects to humans and animals. Now, this last paragraph has kind of been, they said they're going to be using vapor recovery system. And what it says, this last paragraph says, these are emissions that could be eliminated or greatly curtailed by the implementation and use of state-of-the-art vapor recovery systems that would also reduce near-ground level ozone and smog, resulting in fewer cases of environmental-induced problems, early childhood mortality, childhood learning defects, male reproductivity problems, mental illness, and many other adverse health effects that reduce the quality of life. Now, I realize you deal with air, but the air we breathe greatly contributes to our health. And I would hope you will take our concerns. I mean, I realize you're only concerned with the populated areas. Where all the place, that's where the monitoring systems are. There should be one in Doddridge County because we have this tremendous amount of activity. Nobody even knew, we can't find out how many wells are being drilled here, how many compressor stations we have. Now, I don't know, I've heard that it's Andrews that has the compressor site on Pike Fork in Doddridge County off of 23. And I was just there a few weeks ago. It's an enclosed building, but outside are plenty of whatever they are. And you can see the venting of these emissions. As soon as I got out of the truck, my sinuses started pounding, I got a headache, my eyes started burning, the smells were awful. So I want to make sure that I know you're going to permit this. There's no doubt in my mind because like somebody else said, nobody has seen a permit they haven't loved, or have gotten their pockets filled. But I want to see it done in a safer manner. If they can definitely reduce the emissions by 98%, that would be great. If they're going to put in baffles and soundproof that building so no sound comes out, the noise was horrendous at that site on Pike Fork. And right across from there, they've been drilling for I don't know how many years. They're flaring. This was all the same day while I was there at this site. And, unless you're going to do a pre-air quality monitor before you permit these things and continue it, there's no way you can keep track of whether they're compliant or not, except by their say-so. And I know everybody wants to believe them, but us that are living with this every day have a hard time with it. And I have plenty of questions when it comes to the question time. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Eric Bernhardt.
That's me. I just have a few comments to add to the written comments I mailed to you.
All right.
I feel these compressor plants should not be permitted to release the hazardous waste listed in the published notice. These chemicals are known to cause cancers, birth defects, learning disabilities, and more. If you think these toxic chemicals are just going to blow away, please consider the following wind speed averages recorded at the Parkersburg Airport, available from NOAA.gov. June 2013, average wind speed for the month, 3.7 miles an hour. July, 3.1 miles an hour. August of 2013, 2.7 miles per hour. September, 2.6 miles per hour. October, 3.6 miles per hour. So you see, this toxic waste will go nowhere fast. I can see no compelling reason to allow this pollution, and I urge you in the strongest terms politely possible to deny these permits. Thank you.
Diane Pitcock.
I want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to have a public exchange with you about some of our concerns. And I think most of us here in the room in some way or another, we're all citizen volunteers that we network together. And I am so blessed with being able to interact with some of the people in my community that they do their homework and they do their research. I think you pretty much realize that from what they've said tonight. So based on a lot of what they've said, and I didn't come with any kind of prepared presentation as they did. As I said, they're very well researched, and what I do is kind of get out there in the field because of a program that we started a while ago, and we're tied in with the Watershed Association here in Doddridge, but West Virginia host farms, and I know you know about it. We've had opportunity to talk with members of the DEP before in the meetings. That being said, one of the things that I'm doing with our group is getting some researchers here, and everything they've told you tonight about some of the statistics and some of the health impacts and so forth, I want to share with you, and also an invitation tonight if you're willing, and I'd like to take you to a place 12 minutes from here, if you're willing to hop in the car and follow me when we have this meeting, and it'll put exactly everything you've heard tonight right there as an example. Doddridge County right now is a laboratory for what we're trying to accomplish with like host farms and other programs to get researchers here. Now I know that the West Virginia DEP is limited in what they can do, and your roles in your various departments, air quality, oil and gas, and water resources and so forth, is based on what the West Virginia legislature allows you to do. And that we understand, but I know me personally in what I'm doing working with citizens that are impacted. I mean, we're advocacy, but we're also an educational organization to get researchers here to address some of these fracking issues. And one thing I can tell you is that when we do that, we see the real life things I want to show you, but as I said, if you could take the time after we leave here, and maybe half an hour of your time, because I know you come up from Charleston, I know it's a long drive. I don't know how much you've seen of Doddridge before, but we are in a war zone. And these people are trying to help advocate for themselves as well as their neighbors. And I want to bring this particular community up because it's the epitome of what they're talking about tonight as their concerns. And I'm working to get them some help along with their volunteers. And I'm talking about the Central Station community, 12 minutes from here, where there's an EQT compressor station called the Saturn Station. Somebody's cell phone's making their noise. Anyway, that community has had a compressor station there for a while, but of course it's growing. It's going to double in size. And about 2 weeks ago, like I said, some of our efforts are to get researchers here that can use us as a lab, and it's working. I had a University of Maryland, they're part of the committee that's reporting to the Maryland Shale Advisory Commission about the health impacts. And I took the gal to that community. She had noise monitoring studies that she was doing, so it was not air quality. But I spent the better part of 4 days taking her around to 8 different houses where she set the noise monitors. And for one thing, and this compressor station that's proposed, I believe, is going to be bigger than what the Saturn is right now. Plus, Saturn's going to be doubling soon. But the noise level on that compressor station, standing on the rail trail, and we were only about 100 feet from a person's house, and actually all the houses that line up that road, was 74 decibels. And that's your constant, continuous noise from this thing. I could smell the entire 5 days we were there, moving from house to house with the noise monitors. She would place them on their lawn and then inside their house for 24 hours, and then come back and then move them to the next house. So she had rented some of this equipment for the week. So in the days we were there, I had a lot of opportunity to interact with these people because they were just so desperate for attention because of what's going on. And just as we talked about the health thing and the kids and so forth, they're speaking up now because their kids are getting sick. I heard so many things that concern me, and thank goodness we've got some people that are going to help, and we are getting some funding, and I'm really excited about that because we'll pay for the blood test to look at what's in their urine and their blood if they don't have medical coverage to do it, because we're convinced that something's going to be found, because what we could breathe that week while we were there walking around, I don't know how these people tolerate this. Now, it's not an enclosed system, but even one that is will vent, there's no question. And we could take you places all around the county where you go down the road, we think it's perfectly normal to smell this stuff because it's always there. Their kids are having nosebleeds. They're having behavior problems in school, like the typical ADD, HD, learning difficulties, and so forth. There's a researcher that I picked up that's working in Pennsylvania for the very same thing. Her background is in early childhood education, and she's studying people in Pennsylvania I should say their children, who are having learning problems and they're living next to gas facilities. We mentioned about the aggregate, and that's a concern because in this community in particular, there are wells that are all around, gas wells. So when you're permitting a compressor station and you're not looking at all the different things that are around there in the form of gas wells and flaring and condensate tanks that'll be venting and all, and not taking those aggregates, I can't see how it's not exceeding, if it were taken into consideration, the EPA guidelines, which then again, they're guidelines. There is no enforcement language in our legislature, but as far as what's allowable and what's not. We do know 55 decibels is what is the normal allowance for just the constant noise level of compressor. Constant was 74 decibels that I watched on that meter. And I don't know what was, the homes were not that far away, they were just right across the street, so I don't know what she got in homes during the middle of the night. But for a whole week that I was taking her around, and the days we spent there, I listened to these people tell me in their households that in the middle of the night, sirens will go off. Then they'll hear these blasts and these like big whooshing noises that'll wake them out of a dead sleep. I told them, keep a journal next to your bed so you can write this down, the date and the time, and describe the sound. Because, as you said, they keep their own logs. So can you look at the logs and see what happened then? One man told a story not long ago during a meeting we had in October, and this man from the same community. There was some kind of a problem at that station, and it was unmanned. Thankfully now, hopefully as a result of that incident, it is manned now 24/7. But in the middle of the night, it just started making this horrible noise, and neighbors running out, talking to each other in the yard, what's going on, should they pack up and evacuate? And he called 911, so it's a foyable thing if you want to look into it, but he called 911 and reported this horrible noise coming from this compressor station in the middle of the night. And they say it happens quite frequently, whether they're doing routines or what you say, blowing out things or what. And during his conversation with the 911 operator, she said, "Sir, I can't hear you. Can you step back into your house?" And he said, "Lady, I'm standing in my living room." And these people are living this every day. And like I said, 12 minutes down the road, we can hop in our car. When we're done here, I'd be glad to show it to you. And you can hear what they're hearing and smell what they're smelling in this community. It's a very close-knit community. And prior to this, because I've always wanted to get some people there, because I know there's issues with this community. You know, the gas wells and the compressor that's there now, that's only going to get bigger. So now they're willing to talk, and the reason why is because their kids are getting sick. Almost all the kids in the community, they tell me, have asthma. And I asked the typical symptoms, because we had a lady that was a pediatrician from Physician Science and Engineers, came here at a meeting we had back in October. And ironically, one of the parents were there with their kids sitting on his lap, a little boy, I think he was like 3 years old, she had 2 boys. And she was one of the ones we did the noise quality, but I talked to her extensively. And her kids have nosebleeds. Both her kids have asthma. The pediatrician doesn't know what to test for, but he knows he's got to test for something. And this is going on. This is a typical compressor station community. It's not these big populated areas, but there's about 100 homes there, and these people they're being compromised by this compressor station. And that's the kind of thing we need to convey. And like I said, these people were talking about the research and they've done all their homework and all. So now let's go look at a real example down the road if you're willing to come with me after the meeting. But anyway, during that meeting, the physician, the pediatrician was there talking about the same thing. Somebody was, I think Tina was reading all the different symptoms of living next to a compressor station. You know, the nosebleeds, the neurological. I'm hearing that from all these people that are there that I talk to. They know somebody in the community that's got numbness in their hand. The doctor doesn't know why they've got this neurological problem. They said a lot of them have eczema. And I said, well, it's probably not eczema. It's probably that systemic reaction you get that Theo Colburn talks about with the endocrine disruptors, where you have low levels of contaminants going up in the air in the form of the VOCs and the emissions. They're worse than if you stand there and get a blast of it and then move on and get over it. These people are living this 24/7. And during that meeting, the lady holding the little boy in her lap, suddenly he had a nosebleed. And he was, you know, like, oh, can somebody get me a napkin? He gets these all the time. Oh my God, the pediatrician was standing right there at the podium about to list all the symptoms from living next to a compressor station. And she came up to me during break and she said, my God, Diane, she said, it was as if that kid had that on cue. You know, like you planned it. No, I didn't plan it. I invited people that we could reach out to that are, when it comes to their kids, they're going to talk. Because even if they have people that work for the industry, their brothers, their sisters, their uncles, whatever, their kids are getting sick and they need help. And that's the kind of thing that I know at the Air Quality Division, and we know this from, the governor sets his agenda. He says, you know, we've got to do whatever we can to enable the industry. And you guys are restricted by guidelines that you have to look at exactly what it says. Does it have the acceptable level of VOCs? Yes, it does. Everything they tell me, the industry is self-monitored. It's honor system. And we can give you plenty of examples where they don't obey the rules. And if the citizens aren't the ones to turn it in, how's it found out? They're self-regulated, let's face it. But you got to ask yourselves as people that are hopefully environmentally conscious, or you wouldn't be at the DEP, I would guess, but how far can you push in your jobs, the legislature and the governor, and Randy Hoffman, for example, because he gets his marching orders from Governor Tomlin, you know, leave this alone or do this or do that. I mean, we know that. We're not stupid as far as how you guys have to play by the rules. But also, can you question things? I mean, do you have the ability? I keep getting fixated on that section of the 2012 Horizontal Well Act where it says, and it's referring to the Cabinet Secretary Hoffman, the Secretary shall have broad powers. Please define what those powers are so we know what we can depend on you guys to do. Because we're getting clobbered out here in this county, and I'm dealing with it, one-on-one with people that are calling me all the time and calling our volunteers, the watershed and all. We're just volunteers, none of us get paid. But the help we're getting are from people outside the state, not from within the state. And why is that? I've got people coming from other universities and all that say, we'll bring the equipment. We've got Duke University that tested all of the water, and they're looking for baseline water samples. Now we're getting into the air quality. And thank goodness I've landed somebody that's like, I feel like I have a sugar daddy now that wants to sponsor us, but this guy has connections, and he's from out of state, and he's coming able to give us funding for things like FLIR cameras, to rent them at least, so we can rent one, and we could go around and take that film of all these different, excuse me, compressors, and show what the people aren't seeing with the naked eye. And it's happening, but how much can we count on the Air Quality Division give us a list of those compressor stations? What's supposed to come out of them? And then we can say, okay, let's aggregate those totals with all the wells that we have around here. Because we have the manpower to do it as citizen volunteers, but can we count on that kind of cooperation? Or are you restricted to what they're allowing you to do? Excuse me. I'm going to end that because I'm losing my voice, but I don't know if it's the air quality, but anyway, look, please consider, I can take you over there, right after the meeting, I can take you over there. 1.5 hour. Okay?
Jeanette Kirkland.
Okay.
And Susan Cleaver. And while Ms. Cleaver's come in, I just want to remind you that we will take comments here tonight. So anything, if there's something you want to comment about that maybe you didn't get to say or whatever, we will take those. Please bring them up to us. We'll make it part of the record.
My fellow county citizens have pretty much covered everything I thought of and much, much more. The one thing I only want to say then is, if the DEP cannot monitor these sites, maybe they shouldn't be permitting them.
Right on.
I had overlooked one person, I'm sorry, T. Stump.
All right.
Security.
I don't have a lot to say, but I have a whole lot on my mind. But, MIT study last year, 200,000 premature deaths. Air pollution remains America's biggest health concern. And with an average of dying 10 years early, just because of the quality of our air. Oh, I'd like to say too, it's great to see nice, young, shiny faces that are able to get a paycheck. I'm happy for you kids. As far as West Virginia politics goes, in the near 40 years since I've been here, I've never known an elected official that wasn't a bagman for the extraction industry. Rands, Pennsylvania, from John Hanger's blog. He's the former Secretary of DEP up there, Public Utility Commissioner, expert engineer and environmental engineer, he calls himself. Quotes Rands, Pennsylvania fracking air pollution study. Compressor stations alone account for 60 to 75% of all air pollution from the gas industry. And just checking on this one little, you ought to get a copy of this on your way out. There's stacks over here. This is the permit to construct. The back page is certification of data accuracy. That's impossible. That just isn't possible. Because I'll give you, for instance, in this permit that they're asking for, they're saying right here and in there, nitrogen oxides, 26.46 tons per year. Well, the Fort Worth study, fortworthgov.org on gas wells, they said 62 tons per year per compressor station. They've already monitored them. So that's more than twice of what they're saying. I'd like to see, I'd like to see denial of permitting, but like I say, not as long as we have elected officials, probably. But I'd like to see the persistent bioaccumulative toxins, the PBTs. I'd like to see mercury, the hydrocarbons. I'd like to see those monitored and posted on a constant basis. The Toxic Substances Control Act. If there are new or unidentified toxic substances, of course they're not even allowed to be in commerce. And I'm wondering too, this ECOSAR, ecological structure activity relationships, they have a readout referring me to the reference of fish eat rules. Now I'm wondering if there isn't the same idea, ecological structure activity relationships wouldn't apply also if there wouldn't be surface toxicity from the air pollution that you could test the livestock, domestic, and wildlife animals and the UVCB, unknown or variable composition and complex reaction and bioreaction, the volatile organics. I'd like to see all this monitored to a fairly well. One last thing, you said kind of got all puffed up about them putting a building around these compressor engines. Well, that doesn't even necessarily reduce the noise. If it's a tin building, it'll probably amplify the noise. I'd like to see, maybe 20-foot soundproof wall around the facility. The facility could go underground for all that matters. They have money to do it if they first suggest and then require. But that's an idea. And it'd take a lot off of you guys back. Underground ain't where the air is. Thank you.
Okay, we actually have this building for 8 more minutes now for questions, and I'm going to go to you first because you actually signed up to comment in the past. I was asking Fred about extending the comment period, and
we will extend the comment period 1 additional week. We've already extended it about a month past when we usually accept comments, but based on the feedback we're getting here, I'll extend the comment period an additional week.
Thank you.
okay, and
Okay, I'm going to sit here. These are simple questions. You were talking about the inspections of the buildings and how you follow it's done by records. Who's actually inspecting the heavy equipment? Hands-on inspections. Do you all do that?
The actual compressor engines, the aerated units, tanks, we have an enforcement section that goes out and inspects those pieces.
So there is somebody who's just not reading the paperwork?
DEP employee.
Okay, you say that there's limited resources for air quality, and you put these in the larger populated areas.
That's correct.
Yeah, I can understand that. But Doddridge County, Ritchie County, Harrison County, Wetzel County, Tyler County, all the surrounding counties here are producing now. We have compressor stations now. We have flares now. We have blow-offs now. Where's all the tax money going from this, and why can't you afford to put an everyday station right here in this county or in an adjoining county so we can keep an eye on the stuff? Those are my two questions.
I think the industry be made to pay for it.
Yeah, that's even better.
They have the power, the secretary shall have broad power.
Well, what I can tell you is this, we only get about 3% of our total budget from general revenue from the state. So we only get about 3% of our entire.
Look at how much are your permit fees for these?
Yeah, why aren't the permit fees going towards some of this?
And why aren't permit fees higher than they are?
Yeah, they want to put in something that's going to make them billions of dollars, and we're charging a little piddly amount of money.
$4,500 for an air quality permit?
The permit fees are set by rule, which goes through the legislature.
How long ago?
I'm not sure the last time.
Rule 13 was updated in 2010, but Rule 22 was delayed. 1991, 1992.
Because if they're bringing in all these jobs and all this money, where are we seeing it? Because it seems like everybody has Oklahoma plates and Texas plates on the trucks.
Well, certainly as an air quality agency, we don't have any purview over who comes and works on the wells, or who comes and drills the wells, we don't have any purview over that. And I want to make very clear, we do not have any power whatsoever over noise issues.
Can I say one thing here? I didn't sign up to talk, but just being somewhat of a, I don't know, mechanic myself, I guess. I'm looking at somebody says you're going to get 11 tons of HAPs. That's the one I'm looking at that I don't like the most. I mean, I don't want to breathe benzene and toluene and all that kind of stuff. But here's the deal. On this page, it says your natural gas engines, you're going to have 11 basically. Natural gas engines running at what, 1,650 horsepower apiece on natural gas, right? That's what, and then it says that you're going to use federal regulations, subpart JJJ, standards of performance for stationary spark ignition internal combustion engines. Okay, somebody came out and said it's going to take all these tons. I don't know how they measured that. Okay, how many tons of all this stuff's going to come out? But when I was reading your little delete there, the organic compounds, volatile organic compounds. I'm not sure what they are. I'm assuming they're heavier hydrocarbons or whatever. But your equipment's only 50% efficient in that matter. Is there any kind of a, at least according to are you Jerry?
Yes.
Your thing there, is it 50% efficient? You're 99% efficient for carbon dioxide, you're 98% efficient for something else, but 50% efficient don't seem real efficient.
Okay, I'll try to address your question and hopefully provide you with an answer. Okay, in regards to the engines, they are subject to federal standards, new source performance standards and NESHAP standards. And so those standards require them to those standards require them to meet a certain level for nitrogen oxides, carbon monoxide, and volatile organic compounds. So basically EPA has done research and decided that they feel at this level that those emission levels are safe. And those levels are set at, for nitrogen oxide are set 2 grams per horsepower hour. For carbon monoxide, it's set at 1 gram. 1 gram for nitrogen oxide, 2 grams for carbon monoxide, and 0.7 grams per hour for volatile organic compounds. So what that means is those are the standards that have to be met. So all engines are going to operate differently. Caterpillar engines may operate where they may have higher NOx emissions than say a Waukesha engine. So what happens is they have to put on control devices in order to meet these standards. So, you know, the 50% for volatile organic compound, you know, that control efficiency met the standard for that particular engine for volatile organic compounds. So if your question is, why is the control efficiency for one pollutant greater than another pollutant, it's because that is a control efficiency that the catalyst manufacturer would require in order for those standards to be met.
Well, so it can be, if you want to put more money or time or effort into it, you could make it more efficient. Is that correct? Possibly.
I don't design catalysts.
Well,
I mean, it's possible, but to answer your question with 100% probability, I can't answer that.
But we're still, somebody's measuring these tons of this stuff coming out.
Right. The engine manufacturers, you know, like I said, those standards have to be met. So what an engine manufacturer does is they test those engines. Like that particular engine, that Waukesha engine, goes through a series of tests by the manufacturer, and that's how emission factors are developed.
Is it done just once when it's made, or is
No.
it done?
Well,
you guys do that too?
When the engine manufacturer develops the emission factor for that particular make and model of engine, they do a multiple series of tests in order to come up with that factor. They don't just do one test and say this is what it is. They do, you know, a multitude of tests, runs, and this is the type of pollution this engine will be put out. Once the engine is put in place at a compressor station, it is required to be tested within the first year, and then every 8,760 hours, which is like 1 year, or 3 years thereafter. So like,
who does that test? Maybe that's the question.
those tests have to meet a specific EPA standard. There's EPA standards for all those tests. The company hires a testing firm that tests. They have to submit the protocol to the agency, the DEP. The DEP reviews the protocol and send an inspector on site to witness the test. All those test records are done by a laboratory, and then they're submitted to the agency.
Okay, so that's done. But you said you can't monitor this. Well, I was trying to listen.
Well, I think monitoring and testing are different. That testing is required of the engines. Okay, like monitoring, you know, is something that like if you had like a, you know, in certain, you know, you have like continuous emission monitors that are going to be going on that are monitored by, you know, DEP employees, and they go out, they have to go out to these monitors and they have to take those samples and they have to take it to a laboratory and they have to analyze those samples. And, you know, it's not an instantaneous result. That type of monitoring is done to show compliance with like National Ambient Air Quality standards. You know, there's a lot that goes into it. It's not something that you can't just go out and stick a monitor in the air and get an instantaneous reading and say, we meet the standard. That it doesn't work that way.
Last question. All this hacks, the benzene, toluene, hexene, xylene, so that, where is that coming from?
Okay. The hazardous air pollutants, you're going to have a small amount of you're going to have, I don't say small, let me rephrase that. I know, I just want to rephrase what I'm saying. Basically, I was going to go from where the hazardous air pollutants were from the facility. From that facility, over 98% of the 100% of all the hazardous air pollutants are generated by the natural gas compressor engines and the glycol dehydration units. The natural gas compressor engines, that the main, or the half with the highest emission rate at the facility is formaldehyde, and it's slightly under 2 tons per year. So it's approximately 2 tons per year.
It comes from the natural gas itself?
It comes from combusting the natural gas to the engines, and the formaldehyde control on the engines is 76%, and then it also comes from the glycol dehydration unit process, and that process is controlled by a flare that gets 98% reduction for VOCs and HAPs. And to kind of just add on to that, I'd like to say that the engines, you know, if a facility was considered a major source, which some of you guys have touched on tonight, if a facility is considered a major source for the HAPs, you know, then they would have to undergo what's called, they had to employ maximum available control technology, or But there are specific source categories that require that of what they call area sources or minor sources. And both the engines and the dehydration units are covered by area source knee shafts, which means they have to meet that same level of control that they would have to meet if it was a major source. So they have to make sure that their emissions meet that engine standard that are for knee shafts, and they have to make sure that those dehydration units meet those standards for the knee shaft for that as well. And I'd also like to touch on something that I think I heard someone say about that the engines, not the engines, but the dehydration units were exempt. If a dehydration unit has a benzene emission level of less than 1 ton per year, they are exempt from certain requirements, but they still have to keep all of the records and run through the computer modeling program. There are still a lot of requirements to go for those dehydration units. It's not just like, well, that's it, you don't have to do anything to them. I just wanted to add to that statement. Yeah. Yes.
Jerry,
Yes.
knowing what you know, and knowing what you've heard, and what you believe, with your job, if you and your family and your wife and kids live 300 yards away from a place that was considered Antero, for instance, 300 feet from a site that they're going to put a compressor station in, would you be as willing to sign that permit?
Well,
come on, Jerry.
Okay. I grew up, within several miles of a large chemical plant, and also from the front yard of my house, I can see the stack of one of the largest power plants in the state of West Virginia that has significant more hazardous air pollutants than this. So I don't know that I'm necessarily the best person to ask that question to.
So you're already totally saturated?
No. That's not what I'm saying. I just, what I'm saying is this. I think that, I understand that you're upset. I mean, I'm not doubting your feelings towards this. But you have to understand, what our job is as far as reviewing these applications and what, we're mandated by rule to do.
Right.
And my job is to look at a facility, determine what rules apply to that facility, and then go through those rules and see if the facility meets those rules. Our state permitting rule in section 5.7 of Rule 13 states that, and this is done by the legislature, not by us, we are the people who follow the rules. And, it's mandated that, if a facility meets, the rules or whatever, that we're required to issue the permit. So for me to sit here and emotion, personal emotion doesn't play into a decision, as far as a scientific decision. It's not like I can, put any type of personal emotion in something and say, well, I don't think this should happen, or I think this should happen, just based on my personal feelings. I have to look at it from a scientific standpoint and apply those standards and decide from there.
Thank you for coming out tonight.
You're right.
I have a similar question. Nevertheless, it's all good, it falls into the permit, but there's still tons and tons of stuff spewing out of it. I'd like to ask each one of you, would you like to live beside it?
Yeah, how would you like it?
Just would you like to live beside it? Not whether you would permit it, but would you like to live beside it with your family? I'm just curious.
If you're asking, would I be concerned about the air pollutant emissions, and living next door to it, I would have no problem living next door to it.
What about your children?
My children, if I had any, I don't have any. My parents, my relatives, my nieces, my nephews, I would have no problem with the health effects of the air emissions.
Why don't you come and live at my house?
Thanks for.
Okay, how about trusting you? I'm just curious. Would you live beside it? Would you have no problem having an infant living there and your elderly aunt with a heart problem? How would you feel about living there?
Or your pregnant wife carrying.
That's not fair. You really, I know the frustration to put them on the spot, but I want to say one thing.
I want to hear their answer though. Seriously.
But you're not going to, okay?
Why not?
You can't expect it.
Who says I'm going to?
No, seriously. I just want to say one thing, and to clarify, the way, and see if I got this right. Basically what happens with all of West Virginia DEP, the various departments, is if I've got this right, let me know, and if not, correct me, but as industry, a driller, one of the companies comes before the air quality division, or the oil and gas if it's a well pad that they're trying to get a permit for, whatever. They come to the DEP appropriate department, they have their stack of paperwork, and they say, this is what we are proposing. This is how much the VOCs will be coming out of this unit, or this is the noise level, or this is how many square feet the well pad's going to be, or what we're going to be doing, and the amount of condensate tanks and how they're going to be structured, or what the shale formation, how we're going down. Here's our geology report. Bottom line is they come with their self-created documentation of what they want to do. Someone at the DEP in the various departments has a set of protocol, and they'll look at that and they'll say, okay, this is an air quality permit for this compressor station. The industry person is telling us this is how many VOCs are going to come out of that unit. I look at my chart and it says that's within the guidelines. The permit gets stamped and approved, and then it goes forward. So there is no checks and balances system to see if what their information was correct. It's honor system, we know that. And one of the things that boggled my mind was when Mark West went in, and it was under construction, because I filmed it from the very beginning, and I have 64 gigabyte of pictures that, of all the history of a lot of these things. I went there one day, it was still under construction. And the thing that blew me away was, here was the pipeline going up over the ridge, here was the pieces of the compressor system sitting right there on the gravel pad. And it was still in public comment. Now, what situation can you think of where an industry would spend millions of dollars, millions, or however many labor hours to prepare for a site that they are hoping to get a permit for? What smart business company, or what company would do that unless there's an implied relationship that they're going to get that permit? And that's where the problem is. It's the agenda that we have in our legislature and our governor. And these guys at DEP, like I said, in all fairness to them, the only thing I ask of you is work with us because we're citizens, and many of us are activists because we care about our health and our community. If you give us the data of all your compressor stations, I will find student interns, because I'm working on that now, that want to get credit for their PhD or their master's or their environmental science class to come here and stay with people at our host farms for free and give us the data, and they'll aggregate the totals for you. They'll take all your paperwork and all your databases, and we'll do the work for you if you want, because we're that desperate for help. And that's something to think about. Can you at least tell us all the compressor stations and what, when they were applied for, you were told that they were going to be emitting into the air? And we'll take it from there, and we'll aggregate all the gas wells and everything else around it, because we got people in the ground who want to do it. So, I mean, is that a possibility?
Okay. I would like an opportunity to reply to what you said.
But before Jerry replies and before everybody leaves, I just wanted to make sure that we understand that the public comment period has been extended to Wednesday, May 21st at 4 p.m. So
Okay, will you take emails?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And one other thing, if you have things that you brought with you tonight, statements or whatever, and you'd like to leave, please leave them with us. And my email address, if you want to send comments, my email address is Jerry, Jerry, .Williams, WILLIAMS, @wv.gov. So,
and one thing I would add, as much as possible, try to confine your comments to the air issues. I mean, I know noise is a big issue for folks. I have experiences personally. I had a drilling rig about half a mile from my house when I was convalescing from cancer surgery. And so I understand the noise issue, but it's something we do not have any purview over. So it's something that we can't. Our response to comment would be we don't have any control over that. So
to add to Fred real quick before I respond to Diane's statement. If you have noise issues and you would like to contact someone about noise issues, we like Fred said, we don't regulate it, but I can give you 2 people's name at EPA that you can contact about that if you'd like.
Yes.
Post them on your site.
tell you right now the names and numbers. The first name is Kenneth, and the last name you spell F-E-I-T-H, rhymes with Keith. I guess it's pronounced Feith, I'm not sure. And the phone number is 202-564-1679. And the other person's name is Catrice, and you spell that C-A-T-R-I-C-E, Jefferson is their last name. And you spell that, the phone number is 202-564-1668.
Can you repeat that number, please?
The second one?
Yes.
The first number is 202-564-1679. The second number is 202-564-1668.
So these sound like, what, DC numbers? Or?
Yeah,
They're
those are
EPA.
headquarters.
That's
Those are
EPA.
headquarters.
EPA headquarters.
Sounds like to me.
But I just wanted to provide you with that. We don't regulate it, but I just felt,
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, really.
Okay, so, back to Canton. Okay, on the emissions that you talked about in your comment, I think for you to say, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think what I heard was that you feel that a company tells us these are what our emissions are, and we just say, okay, and that's that. That's not true. It's just not me, but anybody who reviews permit applications. We go to the manufacturer data sheets, we go through and calculate those emissions to make sure that that they submit the application is true. I go through for those glycol dehydration units, and I put them in a computer modeling program to replicate to make sure that what they submitted is accurate. We make them submit the input and output values for that so that all that stuff can be, validated. Same thing for like the reboilers, same thing for the tanks. So, we go through and we check those calculations. And I can't tell you how many times that I had to call companies and ask questions. How did you come up with this? Or maybe we can, or make them resubmit calculations because they weren't done correctly. So I don't think it's fair to say that we just accept whatever they send us, because we do go through and validate those numbers.
So when they make modifications, what kind of, in other words, example, oil and gas department, when the water resources, they say where they're going to draw the water. Is that ever where they really withdraw the water? And there is so when changes are made, or Mark West, for example, it's going in, it's on phase 3 now. I think 4 and 5 are in the works. It's going to be 10 phases. And I assume you've been by and seen it, I assume.
I know where it is,
Yeah.
yes.
So, you've been there in the last few months.
I know where it is, yes.
So, all around it are gas wells. So, again, you're looking at, this is what's coming out of there. And it's got 10 more phases. So, long term, it's like it's as if these things get slipped in a little bit at a time, because it's harder to turn back and reverse.
Well,
it's just like at the school, they're given that after the fact air quality permit, because the industry didn't have the permit to begin with that they were supposed to. Why not just shut them down? They shouldn't have done it in the first place. Yeah. But that doesn't happen, and that's what's so frustrating for all of us. It's like, slap on the wrist, we'll get you the permit, we'll make it legal.
If a modification for something like you're talking about, Mark West, occurs, let me assure you that we go back and we look to make sure that any type of whether, if it was, like a PSD violation.
Right, so the Antioch station that's going in almost right across the street's being aggregated into what's coming out of Mark West when it's all said and done.
The one?
The one on Antioch Road, there's something going in up there, there's a compressor. No, it's a compressor too that's going in up there.
Source aggregation is a topic that it would probably take 2 hours to go through the whole thing. But it's a very complex set of, I guess I'll call it a rule, where you have to go through and you have to analyze things on a case-by-case basis to make that source aggregation decision, which is set forth by EPA. The West Virginia DEP doesn't have its own set of source aggregation rules. We follow the EPA guidelines on how aggregation occurs. And I understand that, people are unhappy with that. I understand that. But, we're bound by the standards. We can't just arbitrarily aggregate things because we feel that you should or shouldn't.
But if we're willing to do it, if we're willing to get the volunteers that want to take it on as a research project, so wherever they are working on their, nationally, we're working with people outside the state because that seems to be our only alternative.
Can I interrupt
we get
for a
that
minute?
Yes.
On 18 South, the road is blocked, trees are down, and they're working on getting them clear. To me, by the
That's how I
time you get there,
go.
they'll be clear.
What part of 18th century?
We had about New Island School.
Was it a
Okay.
tornado?
Middle Island School?
Just, no, it
didn't
wasn't
have
a tornado. It was just the heavy winds and rain.
Okay,
Excuse me.
can I take her back here, because
Oh,
she's
yeah.
been waiting patiently.
Mine's a real quick question. How many inspectors does the DEP have on air quality for the Marcellus wells?
We don't have, our inspectors don't tend to specialize, but however, many of them have begun to specialize because, you know, of all the industry work. I believe there's 13 that work in enforcement. We have,
For the whole state?
for the whole state. Wow. And there's regional offices, you know, that have a couple, but Dawson County has covered out the Charleston office.
Well, I will say that we do have several inspectors that spend a lot of time up here. I know that personally because, you know, of the work that I have in the permitting side of it, and I work with several of our inspectors who, that's basically all they do is natural gas stuff.
Now, as far as database and all these compressors, so you have a list
Excuse
of
me
those
just
compressors.
a second, but there's been some other people, I think Ms. Bertram's already left. And
Yeah, Mr. Stone.